Hey, Jack.
Hey, Trevor, how are you?
I'm doing great. Welcome back to another episode of Hey, Jack, Leadership Reflections with Jack Nalig. Jack, we have a really special episode here today. We got a lot of questions from our listeners, and if you're open to it, I would love just to ask you some of these questions and get your reflections and thoughts on them. How's that sound?
Let's do it.
All right, perfect. So I'm going to keep these anonymous for the sake of our guest here. The first question that we have, though, I think is a really good one and one I've personally struggled with and still probably do to this day. And the question is, how do you deliver bad news?
Okay, well, it's a simple question, but it's got a lot of pieces to it because of the situation, meaning what bad news, right? So I'll just profile a couple of different environments that you would have to deliver bad news and don't know if it's going to hit the listener's question, but we'll give it a try, right? So maybe I'll start with the worst one first, right? So the worst bad news that you ever have to deliver as a leader would be if you're having to lay somebody off and or fire somebody, right? But in a weird way, the firing is easier than the laying off thing. So the way that works is, let's do the easier of the two, right? If you're having to fire somebody, and usually that means they were underperforming over a period of time and you gave a lot of opportunities, so and they just didn't fit in the end, and for whatever reason you couldn't repurpose the individual and you had to, terminate their employment. Usually that environment is a very short communication. It's bringing them in, quickly saying while you're there, recapping quickly the fact that that individual knows that they've been struggling in their job. And then you just sort of end it with, so we've made a decision to end our cooperation or end your employment with the company. And we're very sorry it had to come to this, but we wish you the very best. And, know you're going to do well when you find a new company or a new job that fits you better. And you do it in a pretty quick way. I mean, it's the way I just did it. It's kind of like what I did. You're thinking 3 or 4 sentences, and you thank them for their contributions, and you thank them for giving them their best that they tried. And then you just, at that point in those terminations, usually have an HR person, and then the HR person would say, okay, here's your benefits like COBRA and these things that are legal, the legal things that need to be said. And then you end it. You don't, if they try to get into a dialogue, but wait a minute, I was doing this and what do you mean I'm not, if they try, you just got to shut it down. You don't want to get into a deeper explanation because you've made your decision. First of all, you're going to do what you're going to do. And you don't want to end it on a debate. You don't want to end it on a disagreement. So if they do try to engage and all that, you just cut it off and say, I'm really sorry, we're not here to discuss the reasons. I've overviewed those reasons for you. It's our decision that we want to do this. And we, again, wish you the best and know you're going to do better somewhere else. And then the HR person takes over if they try again, right? Then the HR person has to shut it down. And it sounds cold the way I describe that, but if you listen to psychologists, they say that's the best way to end a relationship. Make it short and quick, get it over with. It's better for them in the end. So that's that one. The fired person versus, the fired person is what I just did, but you can also have fired because of really bad behavior, like bad things. Now, those are real short and sweet. You 1 or 2 sentences, hand it to the HR person and let them go, because they know that if they lie, cheat, or stole, right, that kind of thing, harassment, that kind of thing. As soon as you bring it up, normally their head drops. They know they did it, and then it's over. So that's the terminating of an employee, the sad one, the lack of performance over time, and then the bad one. The tougher one, though, is the layoff situation, right? So a company could make a decision. they've wanted to reduce their force by some number. The math had to be determined who it was going to be. And usually one or two managers in that company have to face the music and lay off an individual that was not performing so poorly that they needed to leave, right? So, or you would have done that before. You would have done it at a different time. So usually, though, then the employees know this is happening, that there's a layoff pending. And that one, you want to offer more compassion, right? You want to offer more thanking them for their great contributions and how far they've gone, and that it's not about them, and it's about a company having to make a structural decision where we just aren't able. I will have 5 people in that function, but only 4, and we unfortunately had to choose you. And then they always want to get into. They always wanted to get into, the why me story, right? And that's where you have to be prepared to back away from that and say, well, we aren't going to go over the reasons why you today. It's just our decision is it will be you. Because once again, you can get on these debates and string it out, and it's not good. It's not respectful. So you want to tell them that you deeply appreciate their contributions, like the other one, but you do it in even a more compassionate way. And then you wish them the best. And then hopefully your company can offer some better benefits to that individual because of a layoff scenario. And then hopefully you can get through it quickly. So that's that. Now, separate from terminating employees, bad news usually would involve some level of underperformance of a team or a group of the whole group, right? And that the leader is going to ask for improved performance because of the bad news, right? So, which in the old days of bad leadership, it would be like, I'm going to go read them the riot act and motivate their ass, I mean, it's like, okay. So this is where it's a true test of great leadership, where you can get in a room, address a group of people about the collective problem, the numbers not hitting, or the growth isn't there, or the cost reduction activities aren't working, or whatever, or we lost a couple of clients and we've got to turn this around. And if you give a lot of good data and a lot of deep information so that they really own the problem, that's the key. When you're delivering that message, is give them enough information so that they own the problem. They agree with the problem. If you do it too short, say this number sucks, you guys suck, let's get better, it's not the right way to do it. So you give a good business case on why there is a problem. And they used to call that create the burning bridge image, right? You want to make sure they understand that this bridge is burning, and if we don't get better, there could be worse consequences. So, and then you always end it on how you're going to tackle the future. What are we going to do different? And you may not know the answer as the leader, but you may say, we're going to assemble some teams to come up with options on how we're going to fix this and do it fast, right? So you tell them that we're going to fix it. You tell them what the approach is that you're going to take. And then you always end on, in my opinion, you always end on the fact that you have confidence in the team that we will fix it, right? That you're with them and we will get this job done. So you turn the bad situation into a story of hope and vision that you're going to really turn this thing around as a team. So I guess that's, the two main bad news scenarios, the one about employment and then one about results that need to get better. And that's how I would tackle them.
Yeah, and I think when I'm just here listening to that, it really makes me think back to some of the past episodes that we have done, and one of those topics in particular being communication. Yeah. And in that, we talked about that along with actually the episode on accountability. And it sounds like, from what I'm hearing, good communication is required, and that is, from the other side of things, that is also what the individual does appreciate, but it does, accountability stems in that. So Appreciate you sharing those insights. And the next
You bet.
question here we have is, what is your recommendation for a book to read if you're getting into leadership and you want to learn some concepts? And I know we
Okay.
mentioned one before. Yeah. So you have one in the previous episode that you mentioned as well.
Yeah, we did. But the question said if you're getting into leadership, sort of the basics story.
Yeah.
So
Let's assume they're just starting out and
yeah.
getting their toe in the water.
So I would offer two on the get started, and then I'll give you one or two more. And I've made my notes here so I can get them all in the episode here. The first one I would recommend to almost everybody who has any leadership potential, whether you're a leader or you're just a project leader or a team leader, right? Is the old Covey book on the 7 habits of highly effective people, right? It's just a really great basics book on how to self-improve. And if you remember back in the developmental one that we've dropped, you've got to lead with self-improvement so everybody agrees that they should do it too, right? You've got to be out front developing your skills. And that 7 habits book hit me really well 20 years ago when I read it, 25 years ago when I read it. And I thought it was fantastic. So, and Covey's a great thinker and leader and communicator. And by the way, the book's a great read. It's easy to read. The second one is I would go with anything John Maxwell. And his name's John C. Maxwell, but look up John Maxwell. He's got 5 levels of leadership. He's got a whole bunch of great leadership books. And he's one of these ones where if you read one, you'll probably read 5 of his books because he's just a good writer. He's a great writer. And he's really well thought on, a great thought leader on leadership. So those are 2. And those are the ones, if I started anywhere, I'd just start with those.
Okay.
Then the next level up, you can keep going. Again, I kind of like Simon Sinek, some of his takes on, like his one book on Leaders Eat Last, that kind of conversation. But he's got several good books up, starting with Why, and he does a great job on purpose of the company. The problem is a couple of his will go away from leadership and more on the collective leadership of the company and not individual leadership. But, the Leaders Eat Last book was one of his first ones that really talks about individual leadership, and I thought it was very well written. And then we did talk about the no asshole rule.
Yes,
and that
that's
was
the one.
by a guy named Robert Sutton. So we owed that to everybody from that episode. And that one's about fighting for positivity, which will lead, to other positive benefits of leadership. So it's a pretty specific thing about building positivity into leadership. But I think we all worry about that story, right? How do I help build positivity? And then I think I'm going to give a cheap, shameful plug to a guy named Steve McClatchy, who we've used at Phoenix Contact for many years, 20 plus years, on training on teamwork and relationships and personal effectiveness. And he's got a book out right now called Leading Relationships, which I think is really good fundamental work if you want to be a leader. And if you might remember back to I think it was a role model episode, I talk about how you need to know the differences of people in your team and what makes them tick and how to lead individually in a collective environment. And I think he does some really great stuff. So I give Steve a great plug for his book called Leading Relationships, and everybody should take a look at that.
Perfect.
So those would be the ones I would start with.
Awesome. And we'll link those in the show notes as well for everybody.
Great.
Next question we have here is, sometimes in larger companies, there's a lot of leaders throughout a single department, let alone in the company as a whole. How do you deal with other leaders who aren't necessarily as positive or display the leadership principles?
Yeah. So this goes back to role model and positive opinion leader. If you might remember, we talked about POL. Maybe you did that in positivity as opposed to role model. But in our episode where we discussed being a positive opinion leader, we all have to remember, right? So there might be a peer leader or a leader above us that's not so positive, and you and others might want them to be more positive. Unless you have a special relationship with the individual where you think could be, quote, their best friend who would be willing to listen. If you have that relationship, or you think you could have that relationship with a peer, let's say leader, I would approach it softly and privately and quietly someday and say, hey, are you open to feedback on your leadership style? And of course, then they would say, well, what's wrong with my leadership style? And you would have to have the courage to go through the positivity kind of story. And if that can happen, then you are a courageous leader, and that would be great. If you directly address it with your peer. If it's somebody above you, I don't think that's going to work so well, maybe. Your own boss differently, though, because your own boss should be giving you performance reviews, and usually in any performance review, the boss should ask the person at the end, what can I do better to help you? And if your boss ever opens that door, it's fair game to say, I would rather you take a more positive approach to our problems and how we are as a team. And that would be a great way to do it. So, but really reeling this backward, the number one way is to be a positive opinion leader yourself, role model that activity, and get, if you see others that have that capability, encourage them. And if you surround the individual enough with enough positive leaders, I got a feeling they'll self-correct a bit. So.
Perfect. And then our last question comes in here. This is a really good one. When it comes to building a leadership team, what are the key attributes that you're looking for, and what is the most important?
Okay, so this will be maybe different than what people think. So I think a lot of people would say, I look for that aspirational leader, someone who wants the job, right? Someone who strives for promotion and to be a higher level leader. And I'm actually the opposite, right? So if it's that apparent that someone wants a higher level job and they're asking for it in the company, now we're dealing with in the company, not outside candidates, right? An outside candidate, of course, they want the job, they're coming in. But people inside the company, if they're really pushing hard for it, I put that aside. It's easy. That's not what I want in a leader. What I want in a leader is someone who really cares about two things, their people and the company, right? So if you see how much they care about their people, and you see how much they care about the overall company's mission and the goals, wants to always learn the idiosyncrasies of what the company needs, but then is humble in themselves and isn't asking for promotions, but yet earning them, that's the kind of person I look for. So a humble, dedicated person that really cares about their people and the company, the hidden leaders. And I would rather be the one going to them and saying, hey, we have this job, and I think you really do a great job at it. Would you consider applying for it?
Yeah.
And those people that you've singled out like that, when you do that for them, it explodes their confidence. It's always been in there. They just don't want to reveal their confidence, or maybe they have some doubt. But when they have a mentor ask them to consider more, then all of a sudden they get on a roll. So I look for that humble, quiet, competent leader that cares about people, because it's easier to teach them new skills and things they need to learn. It's harder to teach them the people thing. That's the harder one to teach. So that's kind of how I would answer that question, I think.
Perfect. Yeah, this was amazing insights here and reflections. We had a great mix here. That is all the questions that we had today. We'll keep this bite-sized, try to keep these episodes 20 minutes or under. For everyone listening, if you have any other leadership questions or topics that you want us to discuss, please submit them via the link in the show notes. We really enjoy answering these questions, and I think it's a unique way for us to extract a little bit more of those insights and reflections from you yourself, Jack. So keep on sending those in for us.
Yeah, I agree, but I also think it's how we want to pay back. Like, we want to try to get as specific on leadership as possible. Yeah. And I think the questions as they come in will, of course, be answering an individual's question, but I got a feeling there's dozens of people that have a similar question. And I would love to talk to the individuals this way so that they can gain specific experience in leadership that helps them most importantly. So
Exactly. So feel free to click the link in the show notes, and we'll leave your question anonymous unless you want us to address you on that, and we will. But otherwise, thank you, Jack, for these reflections and insights, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode.
take care, everybody. Go lead.
Take care.